Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into the high-stakes, high-reward world of venture capital. It's a universe filled with these incredibly complex term sheets, super intense negotiations, and of course, world-changing ideas. But what if I told you that underneath all of that complexity, it all really just boils down to two simple concepts? Let's jump in and demystify this thing.
Here it is. This is the one sentence that cuts through all the noise. Every single clause, every negotiation point, every late-night phone call with your lawyers and investors, it can all be filtered through this one really powerful lens. This is the absolute key to understanding what you're truly getting and, maybe more importantly, what you're really giving up.
Okay, so economics and control. What do we actually mean by that? These aren't just some abstract terms you'd hear in business school. They are the fundamental pillars of every single venture deal out there. Let's break them down.
And the distinction between them is actually pretty interesting when you think about it. Economics is all about the finish line, right? It's the financial outcome when the company gets sold or goes public. It's really just the math of the exit. Control, on the other hand, well, that's all about the journey. It's about who has their hands on the steering wheel, who gets to influence strategy, and who has the power to veto huge decisions along the way. So under that economics umbrella, you've got the terms that directly slice up the financial pie. Now, valuation, that's the headline number everyone talks about, but the real story is often buried in the other terms. A single clause, like liquidation preference, for instance, can literally be the difference between a founder getting millions of dollars or walking away with absolutely nothing, even in what looks like a decent exit.
And then on the control side, these are the levers of power. A board seat is the most obvious form of control, but the real power is often hidden away in the fine print. These things called protective provisions, for example, can give an investor with just a small minority stake the power to slam the brakes on huge company decisions, like selling the company or raising more money.
Okay, so now that we have this framework in our minds, let's talk about who you'll be dealing with and what the whole process actually looks like. Because honestly, understanding the people and the process is just as important as understanding the terms themselves.
There are really three main characters in this story. First, there's you, the entrepreneur. And let me be clear, you cannot pawn this off on someone else. You have to lead this process. Then there's the VC, specifically the general partner who makes the final call. And finally, your lawyer. And this is not a job for your cousin who does real estate law. You need a specialist who lives and breathes this stuff and can be your true partner in that tug of war between economics and control.
The path to getting that funding? Well, it usually follows these 5 steps. It almost always starts with a warm referral, which leads to the pitch, and then the VCs do their homework on you. That's due diligence. If you pass that test, you'll get a term sheet, which is basically the blueprint for the deal. And the final step is negotiating that blueprint and turning it into the fuel for your company, actual cash in the bank.
All right, this is where the rubber meets the road. Let's apply our economics versus control framework to the most critical terms you're going to find in that term sheet. This is where all that theory becomes very, very real.
Let's start with a massive economic term, liquidation preference. Think of it like this. It's an insurance policy for the investor. In any sale of the company, this clause makes sure the VC gets their money back first, and sometimes even more than their money back, before anyone else, including you, the founder, sees a single dime.
Okay, let's look at the math here, because this is where it can get kind of wild. An investor puts in $5 million for 50% of your company. Later, it sells for $10 million. You'd think, hey, 50-50 split, right? We each get $5 million. Nope. With something called participating preference, the investor gets to double dip. First, they take their $5 million back, right off the top. Then, they also get their 50% share of the $5 million that's left over. The result? The VC walks away with $7.5 million, leaving you, the founder, with just $2.5 million. That right there is economics in action.
So that's the money. But what about the power? What happens after the deal is done? Even if investors don't own more than 50% of the company, can they still control it? The answer is, you bet they can. And that power, well, it all starts with the board of directors. This is the command center, the inner sanctum, the ultimate decision-making body for the entire company. And how that board is put together is one of the most critical control terms you will ever negotiate.
Now here's what's really important to get. The goal here is usually balance, not a hostile takeover. Smart VCs, they don't want to run your company day to day. They want influence. That's why a pretty common setup is 2 founder seats, 2 investor seats, and 1 independent seat that you both agree on. No single group has total control, which forces everyone to talk, to collaborate.
Okay, so while we're talking about control and the board, let's not forget about a little term that has a huge and often kind of hidden economic punch for founders, and that's the employee option pool.
Okay, I want you to look closely at this cap table. Here's the magic trick, or depending on your perspective, the sleight of hand. VCs will almost always insist that the option pool for new hires gets created before their money comes in. Why do they do this? Simple. It means the dilution from creating that pool of stock for future employees, it comes entirely out of the pockets of the existing shareholders. And who's that? Mostly you. It's a subtle but powerful way of adjusting the valuation in their favor.
All right, we've covered the framework, the players, and the tricky terms. So, what do you do with all this? How do you put this knowledge into action? Here's your playbook. Okay, let's boil it all down. 1, every time you negotiate, ask yourself, is this about economics or is this about control? 2, you have to model out your exit scenarios. Don't just guess what that liquidation preference means. 3, understand the option pool shuffle. Know what your true valuation is after that gets factored in. 4, fight for a balanced board. It's your best defense. And 5, please master your cap table. Don't just hand this off to your lawyer and hope for the best. You need to own this.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. The next time you're at that negotiating table, when you're deciding what to fight for, what are you really fighting for? Are you optimizing for economics, just trying to get the highest possible valuation? Or are you optimizing for control, maintaining command of your company's destiny? Because knowing the answer to that question, well, it's going to define not just this one deal, but the entire future of what you're trying to build.